I'll be quoting from the King James Version this morning. I started using that over 70 years ago, and I just stayed with it. And so it might sound a little different from what some versions you're using here today. In the James, the first chapter and the second, third, and fourth verses, James said, "My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations, knowing this, that the trying of your faith worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that ye may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing." I'm glad that Stephen is encouraging us to put scriptures to memory, because I know that if we put them in our heart and meditate upon them and let them direct our thoughts and activities, it will help to keep us from yielding to temptation when it comes before us. Now, Moses told the children of Israel in Deuteronomy 6 and 7, "These words which I command you this day shall be in your heart, and ye shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise up." I take it that he meant that, and I think that we are making a mistake if we fail to teach our children to put God's word in our heart and do it often and regular and be an example to them. Thank you.
Morning. Turn to Numbers 20. You may have to find that one. It's in the Old Testament. We don't often think about water. It's pretty readily available to us today. Many of us have probably thrown away or have sitting around our house a half empty or half full, I'll depend on which one you are, bottle of water. We often throw that away. I often say that in the future, we may have to mine our trash pits to get all that water back, because we seal it up in those plastic bottles and it never goes back into the rain cycle. And it may be in a long time since you've thought about the rain cycle. Ask your kids. I'm sure they can tell it to you if you don't know what it is. Good morning. Good morning. We're going to look at finding God in waterless places. Finding God in waterless places. If you're in our pews this morning, there should be a handout for you, and you're welcome to use that to follow along. We'd love for you to do that. And that just kind of helps you keep track. And on the back, there's actually a version for the children or for the adults, whichever one you want to go with. But we're going to look at God in waterless places this morning. God in waterless places. I want to catch you up to the story in Numbers chapter 20. In Numbers chapter 20, there's a lot about to happen. But before it ever happened, there were some things before. And so often we jump into a story and that's your life sometimes. One day you were 10, and one day you were 47. Sorry, I do math. That wasn't good for me. That is not my strong point. That's why I'm a history teacher. So what I need you to think about today is how quick life goes. Guys, we're having some technology problems this morning, and I apologize if you see me looking up top. It's not that I'm avoiding you. We're just, again, moving back in the building, and some of this equipment has sit around maybe for a few days and has not been working like we'd like it to, so we're going to try to fix that real quick. I promise it will not take 37 years. That will not be our hope there. Our hope there. What had been happening to the children of Israel? Well, they had left slavery. They had left Egypt. and they had gone and followed Moses. In following Moses, they had reached the edge of the promised land, and in reaching the edge of the promised land, they had gone into the promised land. And for 40 days, they had looked around. And when they came back, they didn't believe that God could get them there. They felt like they were too small. They felt like they were not able to. They had forgotten how big their God was in a very short time period. You ever forget how big your God is in a very short time period? Maybe in as little as 7 days. I don't know where you were last Sunday with your walk with God. I don't know where you are this Sunday with your walk with God. I don't know what has happened between those 2 points on a timeline. But it's very possible somewhere in there you forgot your walk with God. So, today I want to let you remember that these folks did not only forget their walk with God, they walked with God for 40 years because of their forgetfulness. Numbers 19 to Numbers 20 is a 37-year journey that very little is written about. So let's kind of join it, if you will, today. The children of Israel, this is their map. They leave Egypt. They find themselves at Mount Sinai. They get the 10 Commandments. And then they go to where God has promised them. And then what we find out is they can't fulfill what God has promised because they don't believe in the power of their God. And so God says there will not be a one of you over a certain age who will get to see the promised land. For 40 years, you're going to wander. You're going to walk basically in a circle. And then you will go into the promised land. That's where we are in the story today. That's where we are in the story today. We're about ready to cross back over. And so in Numbers 20, you've got to understand that there's a new generation. There's a new generation. And in Numbers 20, this is not the group that didn't go in. This is the group that's heard about not going in. And they have the same complaints as they had 37 years ago. Any of you know someone who just constantly complains or complains about the same thing over and over and over again? That's what's going to go on here, except it's a new generation. It's a new generation that's going to complain. So it's kind of like same song, but just a new group singing it. And so what we find here is 40 years of wandering. So why doesn't God tell us a lot about those 37 years? Probably because there wasn't a lot to write about. Well, what do you write about? Oh, we made camp today. Oh, we had manna today. Oh, we broke camp today. Guess what we're going to do tomorrow? Same thing. 37 years in a row. I've often wondered what it was like to have manna and quail on a regular basis. How many ways can we cook manna? How many of you want to go to a fellowship meal? You know what you're all bringing, ladies? Manna. One person gathered, thank you. All right, yeah, we're all bringing manna. Now maybe you made manna au gratin today. Anybody make manna au gratin for us today? Or manna fricassee or whatever it is. I mean, how many times? So maybe there's not, because honestly their lives didn't change a whole lot. They went to a lot of funerals. Did you think about that? In those 40 years, they went to a lot of funerals because a whole generation died. Let me go ahead and tell you folks, we've struggled with that here at our congregation. If you're visiting with us today, we have grief still in our pews. For the last few months, it seems especially, this congregation has been hit hard by loss. And so this morning, if somebody may seem a little lost or may not be as friendly toward you, please don't judge us on that. Give us some time to heal. It seems like every Sunday, the last few Sundays, whether we were over there in the pavilion or whether we were in here, we were announcing a loss. And not just a loss of somebody connected, but a loss of somebody who was here, who was us. And so I know that we're healing from that, but I think about for 37 years, they attended a lot of funerals as they watched a generation die off. It's interesting that Numbers 20 starts with a death. Numbers 20 starts with a death. It ends with a death. The first death is Moses' sister. It's Miriam. Miriam will live to be 127 years old. There you go. There's a goal for you. At the end of the chapter, it's Aaron who's going to die. He lives to be 123. And in this same time period, Moses will die. Not in this chapter. We'll see that in the book of Deuteronomy in a later study maybe. But Moses will die at 120. Remember, Moses is the little brother. Join me, if you will, in Numbers chapter 20. Then the children of Israel, the whole congregation came into the wilderness of Zin in the first month. And the people stayed in Kadesh. And Miriam died there and was buried there. They've just had what? Another funeral. That's what they've had, another funeral. But this one is important to Moses. This was impactful to Moses. Now, as this has been going on, and many of you have been involved in that recently, you've been involved in the planning and the participation and the grieving and the healing and the thinking and the reminiscence and even the joy of death. Now, there was no water for the congregation, so they gathered together against Moses and Aaron. Now, think about where Moses and Aaron are mentally. They have just buried their sister. And the people contended with Moses and spoke, saying, if only we had died when our brethren died before the Lord. What's going on? They got no water. Had they forgotten that God had fed them today? Had they forgotten that God would feed them tomorrow? Yet what they're complaining about is right now, at this moment, they have a God who feeds them, and they really think he's going to let them dry up. And so they go to Moses and Aaron. If only we had died with our brethren. Now, you got to realize this is the second time Moses has heard this song. Moses had heard this song 37 years ago when the generation before them had said, we don't have enough water, right after they'd gone through a time where God had used water to destroy the Egyptian army. Maybe he's thinking, yeah, I kind of wish you had have. Right? Heard this song before. Why have you brought us to the assembly of the Lord into the wilderness that we and our animals should die here? And why have you made us come up out of Egypt to bring us to this evil place? This is what I love, verse 5. Are you with me, verse 5? Some of those children were born in the wilderness. They had never even seen what? Egypt. They'd never even seen Egypt. But they said, oh, back in the day. Is not a place of grain or figs or vines or pomegranates, nor is there any water to drink. Well, guys, we've got to get a visual on this. And this is our visual. This is where they are. This is the wilderness of Zin. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you, I look at this picture and I don't see a lot of water. How about you? I don't see a lot of water. I can understand how they came here and they said, oh, we don't have water. Now, guys, it's possible the children of Israel were over 1 million people at this point. I've never had to get water for 1 million people. How about you? Any of you just had to get water for one person in the middle of the night when they needed a drink of water because they were really trying not to go to bed? Any of you been on that story? You ever had the little kid? I had a buddy one time. He said, I was laying there one night and my son was in the other room and he said, Dad, yes, son, I need a drink of water. He said, no, you don't. Go to bed. Dad, I need a drink. No, you don't. Go to bed. Dad, do you need me to come in here? Yes, and bring me a drink of water. Right? I mean, isn't that who we are? Right? And so that's what's going on here. So, this is the wilderness of Zin. Yes, but here's what it also is not. Are you with me, church? It is not the promised land. It is not the promised land. It wasn't supposed to look like the promised land. It was not supposed to be the promised land. It was on the border of the promised land. They're not there yet. So what does it say? Why did you bring us to this evil place? It is not a place of grain or figs or vines. Think about what their forefathers had told them. Their forefathers had told them, man, when the spies went into that land, they brought back huge clumps of grapes. And they're looking at the wilderness of Sin and going, where? They're not in the promised land. They're on the edge. It says, why have you brought us to this evil place where there are no figs or vines or pomegranates? And in case you didn't get our message, there's no water to drink. Yeah, we got the message. It's up in verse 2, right? Are you with me, church? Anybody ever had to tell you something again because they thought you didn't get it the first time? So they're not there yet. Guys, how do any of you get when your needs are not met? Do any of you get what I get? And we've taken two words and squished them together and it's made a whole new word, hangry. Any of you get hangry? About 6:30, 7 o'clock at night, I eat my lunch around 12:30. It's been 6 hours, and as you can tell, I got to eat every 6 hours. I get a little hangry. I mean, there have been times that I've gone through the drive-thru maybe late at night and like, I'm so hangry, I want to order meal 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 7 twice. How about you? You been there? Am I with real people? Yeah. You ever hangry? You ever not your best when something isn't your way? Well, that's these people. Guys, they're standing and they say, you know what, we don't have water, and because they don't have water, we're going to turn into a bunch of complainers. Let's see how it was handled. So Moses and Aaron went from the presence of the assembly to the door of the tabernacle, the meeting, and they fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. Now remember, they're still in mourning. Are you with me? They're still in mourning. They have just had a group come to them and not say, we're sorry about your sister, but where's the water? Where's the water? I want you to notice their reaction. I want you to notice at least their first reaction. Guys, anyone ever get up in your face? Anybody just like right here and they're in your face? I want you to see what Moses and Aaron did in that situation. They got down on their face. You might need to underline that in your Bible. Next time somebody gets up in your face, maybe you need to get down on your face. If you do it literally, I guarantee you it's probably going to stop the conversation. How about that, right? Any of you in customer service and somebody gets up in your face, just go, excuse me, and just prostrate yourself out on the ground and start praying. That's going to be the most interesting customer experience that they have ever had. I'm going to go ahead and tell you right now. Now I want you to see that. And they fell on their faces, and the glory of the Lord appeared to them. How many of us probably need to stop sometime and pray about something and let the glory of the Lord, those passages that maybe we've memorized, fall on us so we don't say something out of hangriness or angriness or stupidity possibly. So that's what's going on with these guys. Well, then the Lord spoke to Moses saying, take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, gather the congregation together. Speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield its water. Now, guys, I got to be honest, when I read Numbers 20, verse 8, take the rod. Do you think Moses was hoping God said next, and beat those people? You ever thought about that? Take the rod. Yeah? Oh, okay. All right. Take the rod, you and your brother Aaron, gather the congregation together, speak to the rock before their eyes, and it will yield water. Thus you shall bring water for them out of the rock and give drink to the congregation and their animals. So Moses took the rod from before the Lord as he commanded him. So here's the deal. Take the rod, go out, speak to a rock. Are you with me? Verse 10. And Moses and Aaron gathered the assembly together before the rock. And he said to them, hear now, you rebels. Must we bring water for you out of this rock? Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod. And water came out abundantly, and the congregation and their animals drank. Well, that's a great story. I hope you notice there is a discrepancy in the story between what God asked them to do and what they do. Do you refrain from rebelling against God in a crisis situation? How many of us, when we have a crisis situation, we lose our heads? You ever know anybody who just, panics over everything? Guys, that's not what the Christian community is called to do or be. We're supposed to have a rock. We're going to talk about that in a moment. And it's not a rock that just gives forth water. It gives forth living water. We're supposed to be the stability in a group, not the unstable in the group. I want you to also see, though, God has often used what he had. He uses Moses, even though Moses had some problems along the way, and he uses something that Moses had made very much a part of his life, a staff. A shepherd would have had a staff. And God is able to take that staff and use it for his glory. You may remember he threw it down in front of Pharaoh and it became a snake. That's the last time I'm touching that thing. I'll go ahead and tell you, all right? That's my issue. But he reaches down and he picks it up. He does several. God takes a piece of wood and does wonderful. If God can do that with the inanimate, what can he do with you? And if you get nothing else out of that lesson, I hope that rings in your ears this morning. If God can do that with the inanimate, what can he do with you? But you got to remember, Moses had gotten kind of used to this staff. He'd used it a lot of times. It had become a snake in front of Pharaoh. He had stretched it out over waters. They'd turned to blood. He had stretched it over streams. Frogs had come out, struck the ground. The gnats came out. He'd stretched it to the sky. Lightning and hail poured. I mean, he's used this rod his whole life when it came to serving God. But God told him this time, don't use the rod. That was 37 years ago. Speak to the rock. Guys, has Moses so had this staff with him that it became a crutch? Guys, what is it that God was doing in your life 37 years ago that he says, that's done, let's move on? What gift did you have 37 years ago that God said, I'm glad you had that then, but I now need you to acquire a new gift and do something new? And you say, oh, but I like the stick. I like the way we did it 37 years ago. And God says, yes, but this time I need you to speak to the rock. Now remember, he had had that stick a long time. It had become maybe his crutch. The truth here is unbelievable. God took something that was common to every sheep herder in the country and turned it to something that people looked on with awe. But was the power in the stick? Or was the power in God? Guys, it's possible in the last 18 months, 2 years, you've made a lot of changes in what your crutch is, or things that used to work in an old system don't work. It's changed ministry. It's changed teaching. It's changed the way we've been able to grieve even as a congregation and at a funeral home. Yeah, a lot of things have changed, but let us not realize that God is still not in those things. God is still in the new. Yeah, we like the way that it was in the old, but God is still in the new. And you know what? Jesus is in this story. Look at the top of your handout. I went ahead and printed the verse there for you. You're welcome to turn to it. I want you to know it's in the Bible. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul talks about this story. Paul talks about the children of Israel and what's going on. Moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that all our fathers were under the cloud. All passed through the sea. All were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. He says, hey, you know, baptism, this idea of being surrounded by water, was something that happened when the children of Israel walked through the Red Sea. It's going to happen again when they go through the Jordan. And all drank the same, ate the same spiritual food, and all drank the same spiritual drink. For they drank of that spiritual rock that followed them. And that rock was Christ. But with most of them, God was not well pleased, for their bodies were scattered in the wilderness. When God gave the children of Israel manna, yes, he also gave them water. And in this case, that rock was a semblance of Christ. Well, why would he make a rock a symbol for Christ? Some of you have been studying this on Wednesday nights. What is it David often says? God, you are my rock and my fortress. Guys, rock is stable. Long before we had cement blocks, what did we put our houses on? Rock. Sumner County, rock, right? Right? You ever dug in your backyard? I can almost promise you, not because I'm a prophet, what you were going to find. You know what you were going to find? $10 million in gold. No, rock. Guys, Christ is like rock because it's stable. Is Christ stable? Yeah, he's stable. Some might even say he was born in one. He's stable. He's a fortress. The other thing about Christ is that he's spiritual. You notice that spiritual water that you drink. Christ is spiritual. He is a part of who we are as Christians, as church. And guys, like that rock, Christ would be struck. And he would be struck because of a sinful word. When Moses strikes that rock, he goes against the teaching of God. We're going to see how that plays out in just a minute. But you know, our Christ was struck. Our Christ had to come and be beaten because we are sinners and we don't do what God tells us to do. You know, it's very easy to look at Moses and say, did he mishear him? Did he just not want to do it? Was it an ego thing? Apply that to yourself, church. Apply that to yourself. I saw this and I just thought it was humorous. It says, Jesus is my rock and that's how I roll. I don't know, maybe we need to make t-shirts, right? Is Jesus your rock? Is he your spiritual water? Is he? Is that where you go when things are tough? Do you go to God? Do you go to his word? Or do you immediately turn on the TV and try to find someone there who'll tell you it's going to be okay? Or to the unbeliever at work that it'll be okay? Guys, we ought to be the people that folks are coming to because they know we are constantly being refreshed. Now look at what Moses addresses them. Maybe this is where Moses' personality comes out. Maybe this is where he is going through grief, where he's got other things on his mind. Look at how he addresses them in Numbers 20. Hear now, you rebels. All right, you want water? I'll get you water. Anybody ever been there? Ever being a teenager and your parents said, go clean your room, and said, oh, you want this room clean? I'll clean this room, all right. And it was done with joy and love, amen? Right? Best. You shove things under the bed in the closet, best it ever looked, right? You just hope nobody opened the closet. You ever wonder about that in your own life? Hope nobody opens the closet, looks under the bed because, I'll show people I can live a godly life. Hear now, you rebels, must we bring water for you out from this rock? Yes, that was what God asked you to do. But Moses kind of has a little bit of attitude here. Now it's not just the children of Israel that seem to be hangry, right? It seems to be he that has a little bit of an attitude. Guys, when we refuse the temptation to rob God of his glory, it is amazing what happens. I wonder if sometimes out of anger we ever say as parents, I put clothes on your back and a roof over your head. You ought to be grateful for all I've done for you. Maybe those are words we said in anger. A husband may tell his wife, I provide for you, I protect you, I keep you safe. Maybe an employer tells you, I pay your salary. I'm the one keeping you off welfare. This business is open because of the sacrifices I make for you. Maybe we have been all guilty in this room of saying such things. What we do is rob God of glory because in these instances, they're all wrong. Guys, it's the Lord that gave you that child to parent, and it's the Lord that's going to provide for you to be able to provide for that child. Give him the glory. It's the Lord who gave a husband, and husband, it's the Lord who may have given you that wife, and it's to provide and to protect and to be a helpmate. And guys, what about a job? What about a job? I don't know what Monday looks like for you. I don't know if you start dreading Monday on Sunday. But you have a job. And that has not been true for some people in the last 18 months. That has not been. It may look different. You may want it to go back to the stick, and now it's about the speaking. That's okay. You got a job. You thank God for that job lately? You thank God for that job lately? Don't rob God of glory by speaking rashly. Guys, we often speak. The Bible says be slow to speak. I get paid to speak for a living. I'm often asked, what is your opinion on something? Guys, I've got to be careful. Am I in the right place to answer you? Some of you may come to me at some point in this congregation and say, can I talk to you? And I may say no. Please don't be offended. What I'm letting you know is today may not be the best day to talk to me because I may not be able to hear you. You ever been there? Somebody walk up and start talking to you, and they're telling, and you see mouth moving, you hear sound, but you have no idea what they're really saying because you're just not in a place to hear them. Maybe Moses was not in a place to hear them right now. He had been going through grief, right? Maybe water wasn't his priority. And maybe that happens at your work sometimes. Somebody walks up to you and said, did you notice on this memo that you put a period, 2 periods after this sentence? And you're thinking, no, I did not notice that, right? I had a few other things going than to notice whether I'd put 2 periods after a sentence. You ever there? Guys, be careful when we speak in rashness. We may be robbing God of opportunity. Then Moses lifted his hand and struck the rock twice with his rod, and water came out. Now that's amazing to me. What if it had not? Are you with me? What if it had not? What if God had said, no, that's not what I asked you to do. But God was so sure of being God that he did not want to deny the people of something they needed. You think God has ever rewarded you when you didn't deserve it? You think God has ever rewarded you when you didn't deserve it? Parents, can I talk to you on your level today? I want to talk to you on your level because some of you last night or today are going to get bags of candy and you didn't do anything for it. You didn't put a costume on. You didn't go knock on a door and say trick or treat, but you like the Reese's out of that bag, don't you? Any candy, and I can say this because kids aren't here, just going to magically disappear in your house, right? Yeah. Man, I always assume that kids have been taught to share. And I just know one day Brother Duncan's going to have a whole little bag up here of sharing. I don't have that opportunity. It's weird when I knock on people's door tonight and go, trick or treat, right? They kind of go, what, right? I mean, it's free candy night. It's my night. Some of you are going to get a blessing tonight that you didn't do anything for. And you probably grumble. I can't believe it. Got to get. David, it's dark outside. Do you know they got to wear? My kid wanted to be a lobster. Where am I going to get a lobster costume? Right? I mean, you've been there. Do you still get the blessing? You ever think God sometimes blesses us when we don't deserve it? We come with poor attitude, and even sometime when we are not totally following His will, because God is, church, so good. Are you with me? That's what we teach our children up here. Because God is so good. You know, sometimes temptation robs us of doing things exactly as God has asked us to do. Go back to verse 7 and 9. And the Lord spoke unto Moses, saying, Take the rod, and gather thou the assembly together, and Aaron thy brother, speak ye unto the rock before thereof, speak, and it shall give forth his water, and thou shalt bring forth to them water out of the rock. I don't know if you noticed the other thing that Moses says. Not only does he call them rebels, it says, shall we bring water? Like it's his job going to get the water. No, it's God's job. That was what Moses was asked to do. Guys, we're asked to do some things, and we don't do them all the way either. Can I just be honest with you? Think of some of the things that we say. You know, we'll pray for those that persecute us, but do we also praise for those that curse us? And we definitely pray for those that bless us. We'll love our friends, but we'll hate our enemies. We'll give our tithes, and again, this is not a giving sermon. Those of you who come from the idea of free will offering, and I believe in that, you give to God what you are called to give, but you didn't give it with a great attitude. You just kind of threw it in a basket and said, there you go. And was it really a sacrifice? Guys, when people used to bring sheep, it was a sacrifice. That was food not going to be on their table. That was wool not going to be on their children's bodies. I mean, we go on and on, right? And did we say, well, I gave it, church. Please don't ask me to do anything else. I wrote a check. Don't ask for something else. I mean, guys, again, God said, I need you to do it this way. And Moses says, well, it was close. It was close. We do partial obedience, but we fail to realize that partial obedience ends in total failure. Any of you had a teacher who was very strict on their grading? I'll tell you what, I had a teacher. I'm going to tell you a story on myself. I shouldn't tell you. I had a teacher who I knew that I could make an A on every one of his tests. It was a history teacher. It was in college. What I was not good at college was writing term papers. Don't ask how I got through that, being a history major. So I knew I could take that professor and I could get an A on 3 of his tests and the final and not write the term paper and probably get a low B. I worked the math on that, and it did come out right. And so that's what I did. And I got my grades that Christmas, and I had an F for that class. And I thought, whoa. I mean, I'm not great at math, but 4 A's and a 0, I mean, that almost is a B. And so I went all through Christmas waiting. I got back in the spring. I went to that professor and I said, hey, I think there was a problem with the grades. I said, I got 4 A's. Here are the tests. Look, I still got them. I got 4 A's, but I got an F. He goes, yes, you didn't complete the class. I said, excuse me? He said, there was another assignment and you didn't complete the class. And because you didn't do all the parts of the class, you got an F. He's the only college teacher I invited to my graduation party when I graduated later as an adult. He's the only one, because you know what? This was the second time I'd done that to him, and he had learned my what? My trick. And he needed me to know that this paper was not about grades, it was about completing something. You there with your Christian life? You kind of marking some things off, but you're not really completing something. Look at what happens in verse 12. Let's wrap it up today. Then the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, because you did not believe me, to hallow me, to make me holy in the eyes of the children of Israel. Therefore you shall not bring this assembly into the land which I have given them. Guys, Moses has walked with these people for 40 years. This was the 7th time he had heard them mumble and murmur. He had heard the same songs over and over again. He had gone to all the funerals maybe. And the God says, you're not going in the Holy Land. You didn't complete the assignment. This was the water of Meribah, because the children of Israel contended with the Lord, and he was hallowed among them. He was hallowed. Again, God said, we're going to call this place where you contended with me. The contrast between the words and the action of men and the words and the action of God, guys, don't miss this. God honored Moses by bringing water from the rock because God needed his people to drink. But he was not pleased with Moses. Just as we may honor God today with our lips, you just sang songs to God. You may have had prayers to God. You may have even read these scriptures in your mind to God. What are the results of your hands and your thoughts and your actions this week? It's not just about going to church. It's worship, really. It's about being the church. And God holds those of us in leadership to a high standard. And when I say leadership, please don't say elders. No. Preachers. No. Deacons, no. You know what we're called to do, folks? We're called to stand out among the world, the ecclesia. People are supposed to look and say, wow, you live so much differently. Will you lead me in that? And what we try to do is show them how we have been led to Jesus Christ and to a loving God. Guys, we are all called to lead. It doesn't mean you have to stand here or have a title, but it means you're called to a high standard. You're called to a high standard. You see, these are complaining people. These are negative people. Yet they got into the promised land. Did you notice that? They got into the promise. It was Moses who doesn't go to the promised land. But because Moses and Aaron disobeyed, guys, it may be the last few months have not been your best with God. It may be this week was not the best with God. It may have been the last 5 years was not the best with God. Maybe you have grumbled and complained because God is not using your staff. He wants you to do it some way different. And you're like, but I got this gift. And God says, okay, but I need you to learn a new gift. I need you to try something different in ministry. I'm not talking about going outside the Bible. Y'all know me better than that. I'm talking about the way that we move and we grow in our faith with God. But Moses is kept out because he disobeyed. He just didn't do what God told him to do. So, that's the lesson today. Letting God be God in waterless places. Letting God be God in waterless places. Here's what I love about this story. Moses does not get to go to the promised land. You say, whoa, you love that part of the story? I do. Will you open your Bibles to Matthew 17? Will you open your Bibles to Matthew 17? I don't have this on the screen because I want you to see it in your text. In Matthew chapter 17, Moses gets to go to the promised land. You say, Matthew? I mean, Moses is Old Testament. Yeah, I know that. Go over to Matthew chapter 17. There's a story tucked in there that a lot of us probably just have read over and kind of know, but we've never really stopped and concentrated on it. Are you with me? Matthew chapter 17, verse 1. Matthew chapter 17, verse 1. Now, after 6 days, Jesus took Peter, James, and John, his brother, and led them up upon a high mountain by themselves. And he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. And behold, Moses and Elijah appeared to them, talking with him. You know who did get to go to the promised land? You know who did finally get to see the promised land? Moses. And are you with me, church? Because of Jesus. Whoa. You know what lets us see the promised land when we are sinners? You know what lets us see the promised land when we do not always act appropriately with God and through God? It is the blood of Jesus. Now, Moses did not get to be there in person. He got to be there in spirit. Guys, we're not going to be in heaven in person. We're going to be there in spirit. And there are lots of things on this side of the promised land that could keep us out. But I would encourage you, don't let it be you and your unwillingness to follow a God who knows your needs, wants to fulfill your needs, and wants to reward your deeds. This morning, is there anybody in here who have been dry lately? I mean, let's be honest. Have you been dry lately? I mean, there's been a lot of grumbling and a lot of complaining. It's pretty much everywhere I go. I'm guilty of it. I will stand here today. If I'm the only one, I'll stand here to say I have been dry in the last 18 months, 2 years. I've been dry at other times in my life. Well, let's just take what has been going on out of it. Maybe you're dry for another reason this morning. Last week, we talked about a woman who was so dry, her eyes wouldn't stop watering the feet of Jesus. But this morning, I want to know, are you dry? Maybe it's because you're so busy striking rocks and responding to God inappropriately that He says, you're not doing what I'm asking. How's your prayer life? How's your panic life? Those are not necessarily the same things, although they can be connected. How is your relationship with other people? How is your relationship with God the Father? Maybe you're dry this morning. Maybe you're dry. God said, go speak to the rock. Guys, sometimes the things God asks us to do are not that hard. They're just not showy enough for us. Be ye kind one to another. Who's ever going to see that? Love one another. Who's ever going to see that? Let me hit a rock. Let me hit a rock and let water come. I mean, come on. Be you nice to the person in the office that no one else likes. No, let me walk over to the water cooler and turn into a Coca-Cola fountain. All right? Stop gossip when it comes to you. No, let me part a Red Sea and let people go through and let them know that no. Guys, this song is so appropriate for us today. It's hark, the gentle voice of Jesus calleth. Not so you can be in the center of the story, but surely not so you are not the sinner in the story. This morning, if you're dry, we have water available on lots of levels, whether it be living water for those that need to be refreshed or water for those that need to be baptized. We ask you think about that as we stand and as we sing.